Okay. Hi, everyone. It's Cricket Barrientos with Sounds of Autism, and I'm here today with David Wilson and Justin Cairns from the Financial Benefits and Security Squad. And we're here today to talk about special needs trust as well as ABLE accounts and explaining to families the way that they should specifically set their child up if they have a special needs or a disability to make their long-term care successful, their long-term financial planning successful. And so I'm going to turn it over to David Wilson. David, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming on today. I would love for you to start out. I know that we're going to speak about ABLE account as well as special needs trust. And everything we do at Sounds of Autism is a step-by-step kind of in order of how things should go. So because I am very uneducated about this, I would love for you to explain to us what would be step one. Is it ABLE account or special needs trust? And then two, how do those two combine? So thank you for being here, and thank you for doing this.
Wow, thank you. It's great to be here. That's a really great question that you ask. What is the first step? And the answer really is it's going to vary by family, which is the first thing that they need to do. ABLE accounts and special needs trusts do very different things, although they work together to protect a child and adult who has needs that might need some public benefits to deal with, to make sure that they get everything that they need from a health standpoint, from a living standpoint, from an income standpoint. So let me just explain kind of the difference between those two, and that might help to explain, hey, when does a family need to start thinking about one or the other? So special needs trusts have been around a lot longer than ABLE accounts. And the idea behind a special needs trust has always been that we want to be able to put money that is being saved or accumulated, maybe an inheritance for that child, maybe whatever it is, we want to be able to put assets into a form where Medicaid, all-tax access, supplemental security income, public housing benefits, where those benefit programs will hopefully ignore those funds and the person can continue to receive those benefits without having to count those funds that they're receiving against them. So for example, if I have a special needs child, if I have a child that might need some extra help going along in life, and I'm planning on leaving them an inheritance, in my estate plan, I can add some special language so that when I do leave them an inheritance, I leave it in a form where there's a trustee, someone who can manage that, might be a family member, might be someone else, and that the money that's inside that trust, in whatever form it is, it could be a house inside that trust, it could be an investment account, it could be a checking account, it could be anything really, won't keep that child from being eligible for some benefit in the future. The amount that I can put into that kind of trust is unlimited. I could put many millions of dollars, if I had millions of dollars, into a special needs trust for my child, and that money would not count against the child in the child qualifying for benefits. ABLE accounts are very different. ABLE accounts came about because people basically looked at the rules and said, wait, gosh, I have an adult child. That child definitely needs help and support. They're not fully independent, but they do have a job or they have some other form of income, and that form of income is causing them to they can save a little bit of money. But as soon as they save beyond $2,000 or so, they start losing benefits. And that's just silly. We're encouraging, we want to encourage this person to be as independent as they can. Why would we prevent them from building a better life for themselves by being able to save money? So what Congress did a few years ago is created these ABLE accounts. And the idea behind an ABLE account was we're going to allow this person to create an account and contribute some amount of money every year, not unlimited, but they can put in some amount of money every year, and that money won't count against that $2,000 limit. And we're going to make it so that when that account then makes distributions, when it pays for something for that individual, that child, that person, that we're not going to count it as income, as monthly income, and that will help protect their benefits. So ABLE accounts are limited in how much you can put in them. Supplemental needs trusts, special needs trusts are unlimited. You can put as much as you want. But the major difference between how distributions are treated is when an ABLE account spends money, when it pays for rent, when it pays for food, when it pays for a cell phone bill, none of that counts as income to that child, to that person. They get to that, their benefits just continue as normal. A supplemental needs trust, you can put as much into it as you want, and parents do all the time. But a distribution from a supplemental needs trust, when that supplemental needs trust pays for something for the child, that might count as income. That might count as income. So which is the one that you do first? Well, it really depends on what we're trying to achieve. Do you have a child who is a recent adult who's got who has a job, a limited job? They can earn some money, but they're not going to be fully independent. We probably want an ABLE account so that they can go ahead and say, hey, if I save a little bit of money, I'm not going to ruin my supplemental security income, or I'm not going to ruin my Medicaid or Access or All-Tax, or I'm not going to ruin this, that, or the other. Do you have it in separately? So that would be an ABLE account. That'd be the first step. You might not need that a supplemental needs trust at all, right? Because that ABLE account might be the only thing that that child needs right now. Just let them save a little bit of the money that they're earning. Or maybe you're planning on putting a little bit of money away for that child, several $1,000s. Okay, maybe an ABLE account can hold that money easily. Are you planning on leaving that child a big inheritance? You're going to need a supplemental needs trust for that, a special needs trust. Did a grandma or grandpa or an aunt or uncle leave that child an inheritance? They received their inheritance. Now it's $20,000 sitting in their bank account, and that's ruining their benefits. We're going to need they're going to need a supplemental needs trust, a special needs trust. And so, and we're going to move that money in. And so it's a different solution for different problems. And so the first step really is understanding, hey, if I have some funds that I'm concerned about, if I want to benefit that child, where are the funds coming from? Really? And what are we trying to accomplish? That's what determines, hey, should the first step be looking at an ABLE account, or should the first step be considering that special needs trust planning?
David, can I jump in real quick and ask? So there's a lot of kids that go into an adult life. Mom and dad want to get them a job, but they've already qualified for long-term care benefits through the state. They have Social Security full benefit coming in, $795 a month, and they want their child to work. But their fear is if their child has anxiety and stress that triggers them not to be able to work, and they tried it out, how does that work? Like, where do you know, like, what the maximum amount a child or an adult can make with Social Security and long-term care benefits before those benefits would be, okay, we're going to take $100 away from Social Security or $200 because you made this much money? Is that something that you could answer?
Yeah, I think we can address that a little bit. And again, that can actually be a fairly complicated question. But if the adult child is receiving Social Security disability, which they
Yep.
usually receive because of their parent, then they can earn money and not affect their Social Security disability benefit. It doesn't reduce just because they earn money. Now, if they get like a full-time job and they're working 40 hours a week, then Social Security might say, hey, this person's not actually disabled, right? And so the benefit might reduce not because of the money they're earning, but because the Social Security Administration says, well, if they're working more than 20 hours a week, then maybe they're not actually disabled in the first place, right? Because a Social Security disability means that you don't have the ability to work a full-time job. That's really kind of the definition of that. That's how that works out. So if the child works too many hours a week, that might trigger the Social Security Administration to say, well, they're not disabled. Now that's Social Security disability benefit. A child who does not qualify because of their parents, because for Social Security disability, might instead qualify for something called supplemental security income, or SSI. Now that's not actually Social Security. That's a benefit through the Social Security program for people that don't have any income. Now, and that's the one that's limited to that around $800 a month. So I think that's the one that you're mentioning right there. Now, there are several different rules there about if the child earns income, does that benefit get reduced? And the answer is Yeah, it can. It can get reduced really quickly. If it's that $795 a month, then an income earned by the child can reduce that benefit dollar for dollar. And in fact, benefits paid for by parents, for example, rent on an apartment or meals, also can reduce that Social Security, that SSI benefit, not Social Security disability, but SSI. So it's really important that the parent understand what kind of benefit is the child receiving. If it's SSI, I'm going to worry about the first dollar of income. The first dollar of income might reduce that child's benefit. If it's Social Security disability, that child can earn quite a lot of money and not reduce that benefit, right?
So SSI is, I think, what Landon qualified for, and he gets the 795. Um, I think he could maybe work honestly consistently maybe 2 hours, 3 hours a day before he would just be like so stressed out. And I want him to do it, but I'm afraid because I'm like, okay, if he struggles, we're going to lose this benefit. What if that happens? Then does he get it back? Like how does that all work? And what kind of process is that?
Yeah, and there's actually kind of a couple different answers to that. There's a legal answer and sort of a practical answer. The legal answer is absolutely he can get that benefit back. And in fact, he can have his benefit partially reduced on a month by month basis. So, for example, if he earns some money and so he doesn't qualify for the entire $800 benefit for SSI, he can qualify for a lower amount. They can say, oh well, this month instead of getting 800 because of what he earned, he gets 650. Okay, well that's fine. And then next month, if he doesn't earn anything, it goes right back up to $800. So from a legal standpoint, the answer is absolutely. Now, from a practical standpoint, dealing with the Social Security Administration can be difficult,
Mhm.
and it can sometimes feel like you're going through a meat grinder. So there are definitely families where I tell them, from a practical standpoint, adjusting upward and downward every month because of various amounts of income is maybe not a super wonderful idea for every family. And dealing with the Social Security Administration to say, well, he earned money, but now he's not, and we need to just bump the benefit back up. It can be very simple. Sometimes it can be really awful. Uh,
Awful.
yeah, and so that's a practical consideration that families need to take into account. And when you think about an ABLE account, right, and whether an ABLE account is going to help with that situation, the biggest thing to understand is that the drop dead sort of hard line is that if on the first day of the month, if that person has more than $2,000 in their checking account or in assets, they're not eligible for SSI at all for that month, and it immediately gets canceled if the Social Security Administration knows about that. Sometimes they don't find out, but if you're being honest and telling them what you're supposed to tell them, that will terminate their SSI. That's where an ABLE account can say, well, if I do have a job and I'm getting some kind of, I'm earning income and I'm beginning to save a little bit more beyond 2,000, that's easy. You can set up an ABLE account and prevent that problem. It doesn't always fix the income problem. Hey, if I'm earning money, does it instantly mean I will stay eligible for my full benefit for SSI or my full benefit for all text or access or whatever? And the answer is no, it doesn't necessarily mean that. And you need to make sure, each family needs to make sure that their situation, how much their child is earning and in what way, and what benefits they're receiving, that all still makes sense.
Yeah.
But it does solve the saving problem.
And then the other question that I have is that you had mentioned SSI, which is what I said Landon qualified for. He got that as he turned 18. I
Yeah.
think we had to wait for a month after he turned 18 to be eligible because the first month they used my income, my husband's income, to qualify him. So he was disqualified because we made too much. But then when he went to the next month, he was actually considered independent, and he pays us rent. He has his own responsibilities for his food and things like that. So he's contributing to our family. But when you mentioned Social Security based on the parent, can you explain just a little bit about the difference between SSI and Social Security? Like, is there a different qualification? Would Landon qualify for something like that? Like, how does that go?
So Social Security is a retirement program. right? And so when we work, we earn quarters of work, and then we pay into this system. And then when we turn some age, it's different depending on how old you are, but right now maybe 67, then you get a Social Security retirement payment that is a Social Security, it's just called a Social Security benefit, right? So a very average amount might be $1,500 or $2,000. That's a normal amount of Social Security for a retiring person. Now, if you don't work during your life, you might not qualify because you didn't pay into that system. And so then SSI can step in and say, even if you didn't pay into the system, then if you don't have any income, you still qualify for this very basic, about $800 supplemental income amount. So, but if you're going to qualify for that amount, you can't have any assets. Social Security, we all can have assets. I could be a millionaire and still be receiving Social Security because I paid into the system. Okay, that's the difference between the two systems. Now, Social Security disability basically means if someone is disabled, if they cannot work, they may qualify to receive Social Security, what they would receive when they retired, early because of their disability. So for example, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow and I couldn't practice law, then I might qualify. I've paid into Social Security disability. I might qualify for that because of my own work history, right? A child who has become an adult under some circumstances can qualify for Social Security because of their parent's situation. Like, for example, if I were on Social Security disability and I had a son that was autistic who turned 18, then my son might qualify for Social Security disability through me because of my own Social Security disability, right? But most children who have healthy adult parents who aren't receiving Social Security probably will not qualify when they turn 18. So that's why Landon has SSI. If he qualified for Social Security disability, they wouldn't award him SSI. They would award him Social Security disability instead. It is possible to get both under some circumstances, but they offset each other. And generally speaking, almost everyone who qualifies for Social Security disability doesn't qualify for SSI because of the income. So my
Yes,
guess is Landon does not qualify for Social Security disability. And those details are not my area of expertise.
sure.
So exactly which benefit between Social Security disability and SSI and who might qualify for Social Security disability, I've looked those things up for lots of clients, but there are certain attorneys that actually practice only in how do we qualify for Social Security disability. But for most kids with like autism, that's not going to be the issue that they're going to be dealing with.
Yes. Thank you for clearing all that up. And again, I know that some of these questions are not within your expertise, but you're very knowledgeable, and that's
Oh,
very helpful for us. But we
I
have a
try.
lot of we have a lot of families that are really they have so many concerns, and just this is the stressful time. I mean, a lot of these moms, I'm watching them as their kids get to this 17, 18 transition, and it's almost like starting over again for us,
Totally.
because now, at the beginning, it's like you don't know where you're going to go, right? And you have to make all the right decisions to get them to that independent life and sustainable jobs. But then when you get to 17 and 18, what you're looking at as a parent is their funerals and their
Sure.
financial plans for
Sure.
when we're not here
Yep.
anymore. And so we have to almost like embrace death. And
Yep.
it's so hard. So I
Yep.
feel bad because we go through this twice, and it's this stage out of the two is way more emotional for us.
Yeah, I understand. Uh, and I would even add to that I think there's two totally separate issues that the parents of that child are dealing with, and they're both stressful. One of them is, okay, what if something happens to me? I want to provide for my child. How do I do that in a way that makes sense? As far as, not only do I have the right language in my will or trust to make sure that they're protected with what I leave them, but how much do I leave them? Right? And that answer might be totally different for a child who's permanently institutionalized versus a child who is on the edge of independence and will be on the edge of independence for their whole life, right? The child who's on the edge of independence, I think many parents will say, well, I want them to receive a full inheritance from me, but I want it to be protected for them to protect benefits. A child who is never going to be independent, who is Altex is paying for their care every month in a facility setting, there might be a lot less need for day-to-day extra money for that child. How do you calculate what you want to leave versus what you might do for other children, and in what form? I think that's a very stressful thing. Separately from that, that parent is dealing with all of the social day-to-day issues. Yeah, okay, he has a job. I might be worried about Social Security benefits, but I'm also worried about him making it to work on time and not doing something silly at work, or being able to feel fulfilled. Or now he has a relationship with someone else that might be sexual, and I'm worried about what that means and how I handle that and what I do. All of those social issues are like immediate, whereas the financial issues oftentimes are sort of background, low-grade stress. And so I think both of those need to be dealt with by parents in a really good way. But in my mind, sometimes those social issues are front and center and immediate, and the financial issues are background and sort of, gosh, I'm constantly stressed about them, but they're not an immediate crisis. One of the things I tell families a lot, just coming back around to that supplemental needs trust and able account issues, is I tell them this: as you're planning for your child's inheritance and future after you're gone, when you're doing that planning, you have to consider supplemental needs trust, special needs trust planning. And you need to make sure that your documents include that language in some form, and it can take different forms. And in fact, one of the questions that you asked me in the email getting ready for this, Cricket, was, hey, is there a communication between will and trust if I'm doing a supplemental needs trust? Absolutely there is. Absolutely there is. But it takes so many different forms. You've got to sit down with that estate planner and make sure those are coordinated correctly. And by coordinated correctly, I mean you can't have a will that says I leave everything to my son Bob, who's 21 and who has these needs. You can't say that. You have to say, hey, I created this special needs trust for Bob. It's here. In my will, I say I'm not leaving everything to Bob. I'm leaving everything to the special needs trust for Bob. And you put in identifying information. You coordinate those two documents. So when you're starting to think about your own planning, or here's the other way this comes up really commonly. If Bob, the 21-year-old with those needs, receives an inheritance from somebody else you didn't even know was coming, and they're just like the heir at law or something, all of a sudden they have money, and that executor's calling you saying, well, where do I put the money? Where do I give it to? You need to start thinking about that. That's a different kind of planning, but that'll probably be a special needs trust called a self-settled special needs trust. Now that Bob has received that money, it's his money, not yours. It needs to go into that. You can protect that, but it's just a different form. Now, separately from that, and usually that's a planning ahead thing. You're saying, I don't need to give Bob money. I don't need to put money into trust right now. What I need to do is make sure that when I die, my estate goes into this previously created structure that's ready to go. And I might seed that structure, that trust, with a little bit of money now so that it's there and waiting. But really, most of that is going to be funded when I die. Maybe a life insurance policy, maybe the proceeds from the sale of my house, whatever. Separately, that ABLE account is a way of saying, if Bob is earning any money, if my child is earning any money, or if I want to make sure that the money that I am supporting him with doesn't count as monthly income to affect his benefit, then I need an ABLE account. For example, you said earlier, a second ago, Cricket, you said, my son is paying us rent. Why is your son paying rent? Because if you let him live there without rent, it affects his SSI benefit, right? It counts as an income. Now, what if he moves out and gets his own apartment? Are you allowed to pay his rent? Well, if you pay his rent for him, it reduces his SSI. But if you have an ABLE account and you put money into the ABLE account for him and the ABLE account pays his rent, any distribution from the ABLE account doesn't count as income. So he can go ahead and keep his full SSI benefit, even if you're paying his income. I'm using air quotes there because you're not really paying it. You're putting money into the ABLE account and the ABLE account is paying his benefit. Now, how does that pair? If I have a lot of money, I'm leaving an inheritance. I might create a special needs trust or supplemental needs trust for that child and put a bunch of money in there. If the child qualifies for an ABLE account, not every beneficiary does. You have to be disabled under the age of 26, right? But let's say that my child is a child with a developmental disability. He's been disabled since birth. Okay, so I qualify for that ABLE account. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure in my estate plan that I have that supplemental needs trust that my inheritance for my child is going into. That's going to hold the most money that we're waiting for him. But then we're going to have an ABLE account, and the trust, if the trust is going to pay his rent, the trust will pay the ABLE account, and the ABLE account will pay his rent so that it doesn't count as income for him. They work together. Now, what's really weird is that Congress didn't intend that. Congress created ABLE accounts. They never thought about, well, what will this do to supplemental needs trusts? There are rules that say if the supplemental needs trust pays for the rent, we should count that as income. I don't think Congress ever intended that this would be the result. But fortunately for all of us, they didn't even think about it, and they put in place a system where instead of paying directly that expense, that supplemental needs trust contribute to the ABLE account, and the ABLE account can pay the rent. And that way you get the best of both worlds. Put the money into the account, into the supplemental needs trust, and have it protected, but then have an ABLE account that you as a pass-through thing where you can pay for some things you otherwise could not pay for without triggering income. And that's how they work together. Lots of families will never need a supplemental needs trust because they don't have an inheritance to leave for the child. They still might need an ABLE account. Lots of families might not need an ABLE account because that child might have been disabled later in life. That's okay. They're only going to need a supplemental needs trust, or maybe they'll need both.
David, first of all, you have such a passion for this, and I just love it. I absolutely love it. Justin, I know you've been sitting here so patiently and going through this, but you are a big part of exactly what we just talked about, because you're kind of the facilitator of all this. You're the one that says, okay, this is the family. You kind of take their intake information, and then from there you guide them as to who they need to speak with and when they should be working with David or when they should be working with other people from the Financial Benefits and Secuirty Squad. And so we are so grateful to have you as one of our leaders in doing this. You guys are an awesome team. I have Bernadette Smith on here today. She is our Director of Community and Corporate Outreach. She has a daughter who's 10, and this is the beginnings kind of for her to learn all this. So by the time she gets to 17, 18, maybe it's not as an emotional journey for her because she's learned and already knows what to expect, where for somebody like me, I had no idea. It's almost like jumping into a pool and hoping that you can swim, because honestly, they have books, that I read when I was pregnant, and it said what to expect when you're expecting. I think every one of us that has children have gone through this, and you read and it talks about all the different weeks. Okay, now your baby is a peanut size, now it's an avocado size, and you keep going up, right? But when you're raising a child with a special need, and especially, my husband and I were speaking about this last night, especially autism, because every child's different. It's so difficult because there's not a navigation or a journey map that can truly take everybody on that same journey. You almost have to be very, willing to modify. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Bernadette, I know you probably have something to add to this.
No, I just want to say thank you, David, and of course, Justin, for bringing us amazing resources. But no, very knowledgeable, and I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to this recording because there's just so much information. And when I get phone calls from families, I want to be able to point them in the right direction. But I did not know there was such a thing as an ABLE account, and I love that because it's, if I understand correctly, it means that that's for like your living expenses. Like it's not something you're going to earn and be able to like live frivolously off of. It's something that you have to have in order to survive. Would that be a correct statement, David?
Yeah, I would say that an ABLE account can allow you to keep benefits that otherwise just a little bit of income or a little bit of someone else paying for something or a little bit of earned income from a job might ruin, or a little bit of savings. And so that ABLE account really allows a little bit of independence, but then it also allows communication with a parent who's leaving their child in a state in a way that doesn't ruin those benefits. Yeah, absolutely.
Was there a maximum that they can have in their ABLE account? I don't know that I heard that because my system was in and out.
There definitely is. Justin's been super quiet. The brochure that he gave, it actually gives all of those numbers. There's an amount that you can put in each year, which changes if the child's actually working. And then there's an upper limit. $100,000 is the upper limit of the amount you can have in there.
And I don't really know, on the self-settle special needs trust, that sounded like that's if some, like an inheritance came in. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Expand a little bit more on that.
That's where the child himself or herself, the child has money for some reason, right? And usually the only way a child, with autism, for example, is going to have money when they're 18 or 19 is because someone left them an inheritance unexpectedly. One of the very first cases I ever handled after law school, when I was a young estate planner, a young girl received $10,000 from a great aunt in Boston that she had never met. And nobody had any idea that this was happening. She was on benefits. This was many years ago. We didn't have ABLE accounts at the time. She received $10,000 from her aunt. That's more than $2,000. It kicked her off of public benefits. It was a disaster, even though it was a tiny amount of money. And so that's kind of one of the situations this exact thing is supposed to help with. But the point is, when a child receives a bunch of money and has a bunch of money, like let's say in an ABLE account, you're limited to how much you can put in, right? If you're not working, you're limited to $15,000 a year. So if a child would receive, say, $50,000 as an inheritance unexpectedly, then they can actually, anybody that's under age 65 can actually create their own special needs trust with their own funds. It's not mom and dad's money, it's my money, but I still want to be able to protect it. And so I can create that trust. It's very limited. It has a lot of limitations on it. If you're a parent, you're allowed to create a supplemental needs trust, a special needs trust for your child that is very unlimited. It can be very powerful. It can be wonderful. If you fail to do that and you leave money to your child and all of a sudden that child has received money because you passed away but didn't think about your own planning, now they're allowed to create their own special needs trust with your inheritance, but it's very limited. And it has a payback provision to the state to pay the state back when they pass away for whatever the state paid in Medicaid or Access or whatever. So if you're a parent, there is a last resort. They can create their own supplemental needs trust if you accidentally leave them in inheritance directly. But it's a worse option. You can get a much, much, much more powerful, much better trust in place if you do it before you die. And that's one of the differences.
David, we call that proactive training,
Right.
proactive reaction, right? We want people to proactively do things. And that's why we have this plan for our team is to be able to share this information ahead of time so that we empower people to make decisions that are way more informed. And there's something that is going to be a long-term positive result versus trying to, fix an issue that could have been avoided just because of knowledge, right? Justin, I know that there's probably something that you would like to add to this, and I would love to, kind of close us down, if for lack of a better word, close us down with our information today, and just kind of sharing with people what, how do they go about this, or what should they do next? What are the next steps, especially when they meet you? Is there anything that they should know?
Sure. And thank you, Cricket. I believe that David covered everything quite strongly here in a very brief period of time. Essentially, obviously, when we meet individuals, we know, right, that they probably maybe have gotten information from somebody else at the time. They may have started to do some planning, either by default or by intention. And so, really, the first stage is really discovery. When we meet people or families that are in this position. David and I, typically like to maybe have joint meetings to just kind of understand where they are right now and what truly are their goals, right? Is there a great aunt, as David mentioned, that may be leaving some money, to them from the East Coast? Those are things we need to have a really strong understanding of because, obviously surprises can cause some issues, from a planning standpoint if we don't have all the facts. So as David said earlier, this is a very custom conversation. Nothing is exactly the same. But to reemphasize one of David's points from earlier, I think there's a very big difference in what families need to make sure they understand is that they want their special needs children to have access to these funds, but they don't want to own it directly. And when the money is in a special needs trust, as David mentioned, right, there's a trustee, someone that maybe will preside over the account. They can make sure the child has access to that when they need it. But again, it doesn't prohibit the child or interfere with the child from otherwise getting benefit that they have been entitled to. And so it's just very important how things are done. When a family says they want to provide for rent, great. We want to make sure that happens. But we don't want to have that money come directly from the special needs to the child. As David said, it needs to come from the special needs trust, to the ABLE account and then to the child. There's some things that we want to make sure the families are well prepared and what steps they need to take so it doesn't impact their other benefits.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. I know that you're busy and we really appreciate this information. I know that our families will benefit from everything that was talked about today. And we're really excited to get started. David, I will definitely see you sooner than later. And I know Justin has, I met with CBS Insurance yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And we talked a lot about the police officer benefit that's out there. So we're working on a bunch of different things to put our special needs planning together, I guess, for our family. And we're, encouraging others to kind of follow suit. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Cricket.
Take
Thank you,
care now.
Bernadette. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.